In a minute, we can start.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Let's start and hope you're recording.
Yes, recording has started. And is there a specific view that you'd want to record in, or this is fine? The gallery view.
This is fine, and we can start now. Thanks, Kush.
All right. Thanks, Padmavati. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's talk. I think we have a good turnout, which is great, and I hope more people will join soon. My name is Kush, and I'm a gardener and a forager, and I've been working in Delhi since 2014. I've been somehow a part of both host organizations today with Compassionate Living and So Good. I mean, being in Delhi and working in the ecology space, I had to sort of, I really got inspired by good work being done by both of these organizations. And today we are part of the Compassionate Living Learning Series, which has been going for a while and has a few other sessions which are being recorded, and we, I think, have either already been put on YouTube or should be available soon. And we have a special guest today. We are going to be with Shrey Gupta. And so, hi Shrey. Just to give you a quick sense of Shrey's work, and then I guess we'll hand him the table. And just before that, Compassionate Living is a wonderful organization that's done work in Delhi since 2008. It has it's made up of a very interesting set of individuals, of people who work with land, of people who work with conservation, activism, with holistic healing, and as the name suggests, it's about sort of, this way of going forward with compassion, and ecology plays a very strong role in all their work. They have published a few things. They're regularly doing people trees, and the list. I'll head forward. I'll head to Shrey. Shrey, I only got to learn about you. I'm surprised because I have a couple of friends working with mushrooms, and I was quickly able to get a glance of your Instagram, which was very fascinating. And I hope I get to ping you and be a part of your work. So I'm personally very for today's walk. For everybody else who's meeting Shrey for the first time, Shrey is an environmental microbiologist by training, and a passionate mushroom explorer. So through mushroom walks, he demystifies the world of mushrooms for interested students, educators, and community members. He provides hands-on training on using different wastes.
Yes, so let's zoom into microbes.
Yes, so after this call, quickly sign in and there, and if there's other places, I think some of the visuals that Shrey does. Shrey, I'll hand you the mic and I'll let you take things forward.
So
kindly in chat box, share all your links and Instagram and website and whatever. Kindly share in chat box so that subsequently you can do it.
Yes, Q&A in the end. Push you.
So a very good evening, everyone. So yeah, that I will share all the links towards the end of the session in the. So thank you for joining in, everyone, and to all of you. So as we all are I'm knowing all of you for the first time. It would be great. We can start with very quick introductions where in the chat box share our names and how are we feeling today. How are you feeling today and what's your name? If you could share that in your chat box, that would be great. So quickly in the chat box, we can start our names and how are we feeling today. Okay, feeling excited. Kush says super keen, but not excited. Abhinav says I'm feeling great. Parul says namaste. Okay, Kedar is feeling happy. Nice. All right. So thank you for sharing that in the chat box, everyone. So I'll just give a brief gist of what we'll do in the next 1 hour. So this is going power pack 1 hour where we will explore different things about fungi. We'll try to explore the hidden and unexplored life of planet Earth. We'll also understand how fungi send different life, different forms of life that are there on the planet. How fungi actually sustains different forms of life. I'll be also sharing few tips on find mushrooms and how to find mushrooms and where you can find. We will also be exploring how to click photographs of the mushroom so that the mushroom can be identified in the photograph. And we will also try to understand habitats in which mushrooms grow. And then with a very short quiz where you can share your answers in the chat box. Then we'll open for question and answers for 10 minutes. So you can see we'll be sharing a lot of things and a lot to explore in the next hour. So let's start today's session, and I'll be sharing my slide. Okay, so with a very interesting video, you might already be familiar with this video called Web, and how the tree connected to. And so let's start with this quick.
Trees may look like solitary individuals, but the ground beneath our feet tells a different story. Trees are secretly talking, trading, and waging war on one another. They do this using a network of fungi that grow around and inside their roots. The fungi provide the trees with nutrients, and in return they receive sugars. But scientists have found this connection runs far deeper than first thought. By plugging into the fungal network, trees can share resources with each other. The system has been nicknamed the Wood Wide Web. It's thought that older trees, fondly known as mother trees, use this fungal network to supply shaded seedlings with sugars, giving them a better chance of survival. Those trees that are sick or dying may dump their resources into the network, which might then be used by healthier neighbours. Plants also use fungi to send messages to one another. If they're attacked, they can release chemical signals through their roots, which can warn their neighbours to raise their defences. But like our internet, the Wood Wide Web has its dark side too. Some orchids hack the system to steal resources from nearby trees. And other species, like the black walnut, spread toxic chemicals through the network to sabotage their rivals. Arboreal cybercrime aside, scientists are still debating why plants seem to behave in such an altruistic way. The hidden network creates enmity between individuals. When you're next in woodland, you might like to think of trees as part of a big superorganism, chatting and swapping information and food under your feet.
All right, everyone. So this is a very interesting video, and video to each other. Just a minute, my slideshow has stopped it. I'll just start my screen share again. Yeah. So this is a because it tells how you look at trees. We might look at them as solid. They are not see the trees. They look like organism, but in fact, all the trees, by in any a forest area, all the trees to each other through this net fungi, and this network of fungi, like this, like a whole forest can act one single organism due to this network of fungi which these trees. And while I was learning, of course, like we thought largest organism like, is the largest on the planet. But like as of now, if we enter the largest organism on Earth, you might to know the the largest organism on Earth is actually a mass of fungi, which is spread across 2,300 acres. And this particular area is called a Miller National Forest, which is located in US. And this is now being regarded as the world's largest organism, because whole of this forest is actually connected through this network of fungi, and this whole forest acts like one single organism through this network of fungi. So as of now, the world's largest organism, like fungi, has been regarded as the world's largest organism, and it's also nicknamed as humongous fungus. Um, and this was about the the size of fungi, like it's the largest organism on Earth. But you might also be surprised to know that the weight of fungi on Earth is far more than lot of creatures that we see on the planet. So if we look at the weight of fungi on Earth, it's almost 12 gigaton. So whenever we are measuring weight of any living thing on the planet, the unit for measurement is gigaton, right? So the weight of fungi alone on planet is 12 gigaton. So fungi weighs 12 gigaton, and if we compare it to animals, like if we combine all the animals that are there on the planet, like there are more than 10,000 species of animals that are there on planet, and if we combine all of the animals together, they weigh 2 gigatons. So just imagine fungi is even far higher, like fungi on planet Earth is far more than all of the animals combined. And it's interesting to see that something that is invisible to our eyes, because the most life cycle of fungi is invisible to our eyes, and we'll be coming to that in the upcoming slides. But basically, most of the life cycle of fungi is invisible to our eyes, and something that is invisible to our eyes weighs far more than all the animals combined on the planet. And if we look at the human perspective, we humans, like weighed all together, we are just 0.6 gigaton. And so just imagine, like we are so less in terms of biomass, right? So this is the weight of fungi on Earth, which is far higher than all the animals combined. So they are like the most heaviest, not only the largest, but like one of the heaviest organisms on planet Earth as well. The interesting when One of the very interesting things when we talk about fungi is its very interesting life cycle. And so this is something interesting that you can try whenever you purchase mushrooms next time from the market. So when we purchase the button mushroom or any mushroom from the market, if you just remove the cap of the mushroom and you place the cap upside down on a piece of paper and leave it for like 24 hours, and when you come back after 24 hours and you remove the cap of the mushroom, you will see there's millions and millions of spores that are released on the paper, and they will actually leave an impression on the paper. So millions of spores are released. So this is how the life cycle of fungi starts. And these spores are actually microscopic. We cannot, of course, see them with our naked eye. What we see is the millions of spores together. And unlike plants, because plants produce limited number of seeds, because each seed has its nutritive coating around it. So basically, whenever a seed is shed from a tree, it is like the chances of the seed getting germinated is very high, because the seeds, they have this coating of nutrients around them, which makes it easy for the seed to germinate, because the nutrient is always there. But fungi cannot do this, right? There is no nutritive coating around the spores of fungi. So just like a tree produces seed, or a plant produces seed, mushrooms produce spores, and the spores, they do not have any nutritive coating around them, right? So in order to combat that, fungi has to, or a mushroom has to release millions and millions of spores. So mushroom releases literally millions of spores, so that few of those spores get germinated, and the chances of survival are higher. So this is how the life cycle of mushroom actually starts. It starts with invisible microscopic spore, and when the conditions are right, the spores, they start to germinate. So all of this is happening, is not visible to us, like it's invisible to us. And of course, like we can see this happening only under a microscope, but the spore actually germinates, and when the conditions are right, the spore gives rise to thread-like structure, which is known as hyphae. And this hyphae can actually travel to like a distance of miles, like literally it can travel up to miles. And it keeps on traveling like this, and it keeps on spreading like this, and until and unless, like at some point, like these hyphae, they fuse together. And when these hyphae, they fuse together, they like they start to produce mushrooms at certain point of time. So when these hyphae, they fuse together, what happens is, they don't immediately start producing mushrooms. They keep gathering all the nutrients, and they wait for the right conditions to happen. And when the conditions are right, and when they have gathered enough nutrients, these hyphae, this mass of thread, which is known as hyphae, they produce something we know as mushroom, right? So this is the complete life cycle of mushroom. So here's something that's very interesting, is that most of the life cycle of mushroom that we see is invisible to our eyes, because we cannot see the entire life cycle. What we see as mushroom is just a very small type of spores, so that it can complete its life cycle, is actually invisible to our eyes. So as we see, like the spore stage is invisible to us. We cannot, of course, see spores germinating, so that's also invisible. And then the fusion of spores also happens underground, which is in, and the only thing that we see is the mushroom. So it's one very small aspect of the entire life cycle, right? So it has a very interesting life cycle. One of the very interesting facts, again, like most of you already might be familiar with this fact, is that mushrooms are actually type of fungi. Now it's very interesting to know that all mushrooms are fungi, but all fungi are not mushrooms. So what do I mean by that is the fact that all of the fungi do not have this capability to produce mushrooms. And I'll give you a very common example, what we can observe in our daily lives. So for example, if there is a piece of bread or a piece of any roti that I have, and I leave it on shelf for like 2-3 days, we see small cottony growth on the piece of bread, right? So that is like fungal growth that we see on the bread, and that fungi will most probably never produce mushroom. So basically that's a fungi, but it's not a mushroom. So mushroom is type of fungi, and all fungi do not produce mushrooms. It's only few set of fungi that are able to produce mushrooms, and we can actually see those mushrooms. And as we just saw in the last slide, their life is hidden to our most part of the, like we cannot see their entire life cycle, and it's hidden to our eyes. And during a monsoon, like something special happens, like there is a lot of humidity, and mushrooms, they love moisture, right? And so in the monsoon time, which is like 2 to 3 months in India, that is the best time to observe mushrooms around you, because most parts of the country will be having monsoons in coming 2 to 3 months, and this is the best time when you can actually go out and observe mushrooms around you, because this is the short time for which mushrooms are actually there, and after that they decompose, and they are not visible to us. So coming 2 3 months is the best time if you are passionate about mushrooms and you want to explore and know about different mushrooms around you. And something that makes mushrooms to pop up during the monsoon is very high humidity. So just like our body is almost 70 to 75% water, similarly mushrooms are approximately 90% water. So just imagine, most of the mushroom that we see, like the mushrooms that we see around us, it's mostly water, right? That's why they are there in the monsoon. So humidity is humidity is one of the major, one of the most primal needs for a mushroom to fruit. Uh, of course, as I was just mentioning, that monsoon is the best time to spot the mushrooms. So it's also a great idea to understand where we can actually find mushrooms. So two things that we need to keep in mind while we are trying to find mushrooms. The first thing is that mushrooms do not grow in direct sunlight. As we all know, plants can make their own food because they are green in color. So most of the plants that we see in green in color can actually make their own food from direct sunlight, because they can capture the sun's energy through chlorophyll, and they can make their own food. But unlike plants, mushrooms cannot make their own food, and they cannot grow in direct sunlight. So mushrooms love shady areas, and I'm sure like most of you might have seen mushrooms growing in the wild, right? They never grow in a sunny area. So they grow in shade. So that's the first thing to remember, that while we're looking for mushrooms, we should look for them in a shady area, because they do not grow in direct sunlight. And the second thing is moisture. So that place has to have certain humidity. It has to be a humid place. So we have to keep these two things in mind while we are looking for mushrooms. So shade should be there, no direct sunlight. And the second thing is the area should be a little bit moist. So these are different places where you can spot mushrooms around you during these 2 to 3 months, monsoon months. You can see mushrooms growing on dead logs. Even you can see them growing on dead pieces of woods. And some of the pieces of wood, especially if you are like out in a park or in wild, you might notice like some of the logs, they get buried in the ground. So they also are a good habitat where we can see mushrooms growing. So they grow on dead and decaying logs. We can see them growing on barks of living trees. So you might have seen mushrooms growing on barks of trees, right? So this is another good habitat for where mushrooms grow. Mushrooms also love composting environment. So because they are one of the natural decomposers, like one of the garbage decomposers of the planet, will be coming to that also after a while. But basically they are there in compost pits, and you can also of course find mushroom growing in soil. uh, Again, open grass lawn is a very good area where we can spot mushrooms. The only thing is, like, while we are looking for mushroom in an open grass lawn, we actually try to look at places where there is no direct sunlight for most part of the day. But open grass lawn is a very good area to find mushrooms. Especially there are also like few edible varieties of mushrooms found in India in open grass lawns. So open grass lawn is an area to find mushrooms. Of course, like humid ecosystem. So if we have a stream nearby, the mushrooms won't be growing directly directly at the edge of the stream. But we need to like move away from the stream, like at least 12 to 13 feet away from the stream, we can find mushrooms. So humid ecosystem is a good place to look for mushrooms. Of course, the area should be shaded. And mushrooms are also found on the sides of footpaths. So while you are trekking on a forest, or while you are in a deep forest, you can see the mushrooms growing on the sides of footpath. And deep forest is the perfect habitat to spot mushrooms. So this was like a generalized overview, like where you might see mushrooms growing. Another interesting thing that I would like to share are the different habitats where we can spot the mushrooms growing. So while we are out there in the wild, we might be completely clueless, right? That, where we can find the mushroom if we do not have the understanding of different habitats of mushrooms. So hence it's very important that we have a very brief, very basic understanding of different habitats where mushrooms grow. So if we categorize the mushrooms broadly, there are three broad category of mushrooms that are there. So the first category of mushrooms are known as decomposers. And decomposers are basically the mushrooms that grow on dead or decaying pieces of wood. We see them growing on dead or decaying pieces of log, and we can see them also growing on, if there is a leaf litter nearby, or if there is a compost pit nearby. That's where we can see these mushrooms growing. I'll also like to share a few examples of this. You might have noticed like something like this in the in like around you, like in the wild especially. We see, like, sometimes we see pieces of wood that are covered in white kind of mass, but this white mass that we see is actually the fungi that is growing on the wood. And so these types of mushrooms, they grow on dead and decaying wood, and we also see the images on the screen. So these are like few examples of the decomposing mushrooms that grow on dead and decaying pieces of wood. Interestingly, like, these mushrooms, they play a very, very important role in sustaining our ecosystem, because they are known as the garbage decomposers of the natural world, simply because of the fact that these are primary decomposers in the environment. And it is said that we remove mushrooms from the earth, within 2 months, all the species that we see, except microorganisms, will stop to exist, just because of the simple fact around, and earth will be covered in a pile of dirt if there are no decomposing fungi on earth. So if we remove these decomposing fungi from the planet, then just imagine within 2 to 3 months there will be no life on planet as such, and because everything will be covered in a pile of dirt. So they play a very, very important role in decomposing whatever there is there in the environment, from leaf litter to pieces of wood. So everything decomposes because of these category of fungi that are there, which we can call as decomposers. They are very easy to spot. Like, we can see them growing on dead pieces of wood. So this would be another example. This is a small piece of wood, and I can see tiny mushrooms growing on these. I'm sure, like, you might have observed these kinds of mushrooms growing on small pieces of wood. So these are the decomposers, the first category. The second and one of the most important category of mushrooms are the symbiotic mushrooms. So symbiotic mushrooms are actually those mushrooms which live in very close association with the roots of the trees, and their life is actually interdependent upon the trees itself. So basically, if I cut, so when we talk about deforestation, and when we talk about, the trees being axed, and we might believe that if we axe a tree and we plant another tree, that might create balance, but that actually never happens, because mushrooms is one example, but there are a lot of things in the ecosystem which are dependent upon the tree. So basically, they grow in very close association with the roots of the trees. Their life is dependent upon the roots of the trees, and they provide the nutrients. Like, they provide the exchange of nutrients between trees, and in return, the tree also provides them nutrition. So that's how they come into existence. They are symbiotic with the trees, where they actually need the tree to be there. So these are called the symbiotic mushrooms. The images that I have shared here are two common examples of symbiotic mushrooms. So these are like this is the second category. And which also makes us think that when we talk about deforestation, while a tree is being axed and we think the tree is gone, but in fact the whole ecosystem that is there along with that tree is gone when the tree is actually axed, right? So this was the second category. The third and the final category of mushrooms are the parasitic mushrooms. So unlike the decomposers, they do not normally grow on decomposing wood, but they grow on a living tree or a living host. And there are few mushrooms that even grow on insects or animals. So parasitic mushrooms are the mushrooms which need a living host, so for them to grow. The image that you see on your left hand side is of a mushroom which is known as cordyceps. Interestingly, it grows on an insect. Like, it has a very interesting life cycle where the spore infests the insect, and it paralyzes the autonomic nervous system of the insect, and it actually forces the insect, like the mushroom, it colonizes the nervous system of the insect, and it forces the insect to walk up the hill. And because, like, the fruiting of the mushroom happens at higher altitudes, and when the mushroom when the insect reaches the height, the appropriate height, the mushroom actually pops out of the insect. So this is like one of the mushrooms that are there. Like, they even grow on insects, and there are a few parasitic mushrooms that grow on living trees as well. So the image that you see on right hand side is of a mushroom which is known as agaricon. And interesting thing about parasitic mushrooms is that they always grow on a living tree, and just like we can count the age of the tree with the number of rings that are there on the tree, we can actually count the age of these parasitic mushrooms also by counting the rings that are there on the mushroom. So you might have seen mushrooms like these. So I have one of the mushrooms in my hand. This is a parasitic mushroom, and we can actually see small rings on the mushroom. So we can actually guess the age of the mushroom also by counting these rings, just like we can guess the age of the tree while counting the rings. And also, although these mushrooms are considered as parasitic to the plants, and they might be like drawing the nutrients from the plant itself, but they have their own role in sustaining ecosystem, and it's like nature's way of keeping a check. So basically, even though these mushrooms are parasitic in nature, but they have their own role in sustaining the ecosystem. So these are three broad categories of mushrooms that are there. Now, coming to the next very important thing that I would like to share is that why do we even want to spot mushrooms, right? Even though like mushrooms are around us, how would we contribute if we are spotting mushrooms? So you might be surprised to know that on Earth, like, scientists estimate that there is approximately 3 million types of fungi on planet Earth. And until now, we just know about 2% of those fungi. So this is an estimate. Like, we just know about 2% of the fungi that are there on planet Earth. So just imagine 3 million fungi, and we just know about 2%, right? So most of the fungi are unknown to us. And while we are finding mushrooms, or while we are spotting mushrooms, something that is very fascinating is that most, like, the mushrooms that we see, like, might not be identified right away, because there is always scope of discovering something new, since most of the mushrooms have not been discovered until now. So that's why it's very important to go out and look for mushrooms and spot them, because we might not know, we might discover something new. Also, spotting mushrooms is a very important activity to support the scientific community, because of course scientists cannot reach everywhere, right? And there are a lot of mushroom varieties that are endangered, and if we know about where those endangered varieties are, then a protective ecosystem can be created around those mushrooms. So I'll give you a very recent example of this. It was in news lately that this year in Himachal, one of the mushrooms that is very common here, and is being sadly forested also for its for edibility purpose. The mushroom is known as morel mushroom, and this season we didn't had any morel mushrooms. here in Himachal. Like there were very few areas where the morel mushrooms were found, and literally there were no morel mushrooms in Himachal. So I think, like, I personally think one of the reasons could be deforestation also, because like there's a massive deforestation going on for construction of a Poland project. So that's one aspect. But basically, we can think about these things, where uh, the mushroom, why the mushroom is not being spotted, and if morel mushroom is being spotted in certain area, for example, we can actually create a protective zone around it, so that these endangered species can be protected. Similarly, like the mushrooms image that I was sharing, in one of the slides, the agaricon mushroom, that is also one of the endangered mushroom that is there. So if we spot these mushroom, protective ecosystems can be built around them. Of course, like learning about mushrooms helps us learn our lands better. So so for example, if we spot mushrooms around us, we might be able to know about the edibility status. So that might help us learn our lands better. And also, like if we want to collect the mushrooms in the wild for eating purpose, like there are ways of sustainable mushroom harvesting. Of course, we do not want to harvest everything, and we need to be really sustainable, and there are techniques on sustainable mushroom harvesting. But it helps us know about the local edibility of local food, that is local wild food that is around us. And also, one of the interesting things is that while we are while we come to know about the edibility of local wild food, local wild mushrooms. So once, like, you have identified with an expert, the next season you might go on your own and with the variety, you can keep looking around, and you can actually independently spot the mushrooms in the next season. And it also helps us understand how climate change is actually linked to mushrooms, because as we all know, climate change is happening, and seasons of mushrooms are changing. So for example, I found a mushroom in August. Might be possible I do not spot the same mushroom in the month of August at the same time. Might be I see it growing in the month of September, for example. So this also is a helpful indicator in climate change. And of course, like, it's important to ensure environmental sustainability, so that, like, spotting endangered species is very important, because unfortunately, when we know about the edibility of mushrooms, the endangered species are also being sold for commercial consumptions, which is actually sad. So it helps us keep track on that also. So these are different, there are other ways also, in like how spotting mushroom is very helpful for us, but is very helpful for us as well as the environment. But these are the different reasons why spotting mushrooms might be very helpful for sustaining our environment. Going forward, I would like to share something very interesting. I know it's been a long monologue, so two more things that I'll be sharing, and after that we'll be moving to Q&A. So while we see mushrooms in the wild, unlike plants, like, we can click a photograph of a plant, and most likely it will get identified with few clicks. So of course, like every species, for every species, we need to have right photographs, so that the species can be identified. So same is true for mushrooms as well. So in order to identify a mushroom, we need to click the photographs like in certain ways, so that mushroom can be identified. Because if we are randomly clicking the photograph of a mushroom, so the mushroom might not be, like, we might not be able to identify the mushroom. So the images that you see here are some of the random clicks, and they might not be very helpful while we are trying to identify the mushroom. So I'll be sharing that, like how to click the right photograph so the mushroom can be identified. So we need to click the photograph of mushroom from 3 different angles, so that the mushroom can be identified. There are basically four 4 angles, but like 3 are the most important ones. So the first thing that we need to cover in the photograph is the habitat where mushroom is growing. So as you can see in the photograph, we see 2 photographs. So one mushroom I can see growing, it's growing on a piece of wood, right? So it's growing on a dead and decaying piece of wood. So I can clearly see the habitat that where mushroom is growing. Whereas the mushroom on the right hand side, it's growing on a leaf litter, a litter of pine needles. So the habitat should be completely, like, we should be able to see the habitat where the mushroom is growing. So that is something that we need to cover. The second thing that we need to cover is the sample size. So we need to click a photograph that is from like some distance. So we want to cover the number of mushrooms that we've spotted. So as we can see on the image that is on the left hand side, there are like 7 to 8 mushrooms, and it's countable. So we can see that we have 7 or 8 mushrooms of one particular variety. Similarly, on the right hand side, we can see there are approximately 40 to 50 mushrooms. So this is like sample size. So we can take a photograph from certain distance, so that we can, in that photograph, we can see like how many mushrooms are there. Then one very important photo that we need to click, we need to have a photograph where we can see the stem of the mushroom and also the gills of the mushroom. So images that you see on the right hand, like the images that you see, we can see the stem of the mushroom and we can also see the gill of the mushroom. So this should be clearly visible in the photograph. So this is the third photograph that we need to click. And then the fourth photograph should cover the cap of the mushroom. Like, how does the mushroom looks on the top surface? How does it look like? So it should cover the cap of mushroom. So these are like 4 photographs we need to click for any mushroom that we encounter, so that it can be identified, and we can always become like, so these are different ways of different angles from which we can click the photographs, but we can also capture a photograph like this one. So this is one very interesting photograph where, in a single photograph, all of these 4 parameters have been covered. So I can actually see the stem of the mushroom. I can also see the gill of the mushroom. I can see the cap of the mushroom. I can also see the habitat in which it's growing. And it also gives me a rough idea of the sample size, like how many mushrooms are there. So this is a very smart way of clicking the photograph, in which, one shot covers most of the details that we need to capture while we are clicking the photograph. So these are different photographs, different this is the way of clicking the photographs, and different angles from which, photos of mushroom should be captured, so that mushroom can be identified. So this was about this is what I wanted to share today about, the role of fungi, not only just sustaining ecosystem, but few basic skills that are very handy while we are trying to not just identify the mushroom, but also spot the habitat where, mushrooms might be growing. And so based upon that, like, I have a short quiz for you all, and that's also a way of quickly summarizing what we have explored in today's session. So a very short quiz of 6 questions, and you can share your responses in the chat box. So you use your chat box to share the response, and a very short quiz that I have for you. That will also quickly recap of what we have discussed in today's session. So, all right, so we just have 6 questions in this quiz, and you can share your responses in the chat box. So this is the first question. Can you identify the parasitic mushrooms? Like, which one of these is a parasitic mushroom? A, B, C, or D? You can share your responses in the chat box. All right, C. B, C. Interesting. C. Okay. Okay, so most of you shared the correct response. Okay, and it shared also B. Okay, interesting. So most of you shared the correct answer. The C is the correct answer. We can see the third images of a parasitic mushroom, because it is growing on the bark of a living tree, and then there are also concentric rings on this mushroom. So it's growing basically on a living tree, bark of a living tree, and C is the correct answer. All right, moving to the second question. Okay, so which of the following is not the part of life cycle of mushroom? Spore, mycelium, fruiting body, or compost? So which of the following is not the part of life cycle of a mushroom? Okay, compost, compost. Okay, okay, so interesting. So almost like all of you who shared the response, it's like correct answer. Very very good everyone. So compost is not the part of life cycle of mushroom, right? It's one of the habitats where a mushroom grows, while spore, mycelium, and fruiting body are different parts of life cycle of mushroom. All right, so moving on to the third question. In the beginning of the session, we were talking about fungi being the largest organisms. So, where I also mentioned the weight of fungi on Earth. So, okay, so we have already have the responses, 12 gigaton. So, of course, that yes, that's the correct answer. So, total weight of fungi on Earth is 12 gigaton of carbon. Okay, interesting. So yes, like good speed, like we are getting responses at a very good speed and a lot of correct responses. So a very good thing that we were able to grab the session very well. Interesting. 12G speed, yeah. Okay, coming to the fourth question. So this might be a tricky one. Which one of the following is a good photo for identifying a mushroom? A, B, C, or D? So you can, okay. Okay, so interesting. Okay, so most of us shared A. All of us shared A in the chat box. A and B. Okay, A and C. Interesting. Okay, so as most of you shared, okay. Uh, Tanush shared all of them. So of course, like all of them is not the answer. As most of you shared, A is the correct answer, because on in this photograph we can see the stem, the gills. We also have the idea of number of mushrooms growing. So A is a good photograph for identifying the mushroom. So A is the correct answer. Moving on to the fifth question. So I talked about fungi being the largest organism on Earth, where there is one patch of area known as Baylor National Forest, which covers which is known as the largest organism on Earth. So do you remember what is the total size of the humongous fungus, the fungus that's largest organism on Earth? Okay, so Chandresh shared 2,300 acres. Okay, 2,800 something acres. Oh, that's very, very precise. Very interesting. Okay, so interesting responses. Over 2,000 acres. Would anyone else like to guess? 2.85 acres. Okay, interesting. 2,300 acres. So most of you are very, very close. So it's 2,385 acres of land which this fungi covers, the humongous fungus. All right. So moving on to the final question, and I would request not to use Google for this one. And that's a very interesting question. So do not use Google for this question and just guess, like if anyone knows. Okay. So the question is, can you name mushroom in Hindi? Can you share the Hindi name of mushroom without using Google? This is something that we did not cover in today's session, but just out of curiosity. Khumbi. Okay, Khumb. Kukurmutta is the Sanskrit name. Someone said Kukurmut. Okay. Kukurmutta, again, like Kukurmutta is the Sanskrit name of mushroom, but okay, Khumb, Kavak. Okay, so interesting. Kavak is the Hindi name of fungi. Okay, so Kavak is the Hindi name of fungus, but the Hindi name of mushroom is Khum. So, I thought like it was an interesting question to us, because since we know the Hindi name of most of the vegetables, but most of the people are not even familiar with the Hindi name of mushroom. So, the Hindi name of mushroom is actually Khum. All right. So this was today's session. Now we are open to your question and answers and queries. So if anyone has any doubts or queries, you can unmute and ask. You can also ask your queries in the chat box.
Kush, I'll request you to moderate this. Yeah, thanks.
So we'd ask people to raise their hand if they have a question, and then I can unmute you. This way we'll be able to organize
And
this better.
also the questions that are there in the chat box. You might.
Okay.
Can I take Dinakara's question?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay, so Dinakara has a question where can we upload the pictures of mushrooms so it can be identified? I'll be sharing so there are various platforms where you can share mushroom photographs for identification. One of them is iNaturalist, where you can share the photograph and you can get it identified. So I also have a WhatsApp support group where people keep sharing their photographs for identification. I'll maybe share the link in the chat box, so you can share the photograph in the WhatsApp support group also, where I can help you identify. Also, there is a live report that we have where you can share the photograph, and if it's not identified or if it's identified, we are actually creating citizen scientists across India, where we are acknowledging each and everyone who's contributing to the photograph as citizen scientists. So you can upload it on either iNaturalist, where it will there are experts who can get it identified, and then there is a support group also where you can share your photograph identification. There's a question: how can we find the name of the mushroom? Is there any site? So again, like Chandresh, for identifying the mushroom, we cannot, first of all, we cannot use Google Lens for identifying mushroom. That's a big because Google Lens cannot identify the mushrooms very accurately. Those who already use Google Lens or might have already seen this. Mushrooms are not something that can be identified with Google Lens, and also because mushrooms can be poisonous, so one should not use Google Lens. For identifying mushrooms, we have to actually go species by species, and actually there is no shortcut to identify. There are a few thumb rules that are there for identifying mushroom, but then it's a complete topic in itself. So maybe in one of the sessions we can talk about that. But for now, you can always share the photograph for identification, and we can help you identify. You can WhatsApp the photograph in the support group that I'll be sharing.
Shrey, I'd like to just add to that question. If there's any reading material, I'm just generally learning about mushrooms in case some people don't have starting point to identify, but just want to, get curious about what are the local mushrooms in the cities, in urban areas in India, or specific to some forest in India.
Okay. So for reading about mushrooms, there are 2 or 3 interesting things that I would like to share here. So firstly, there is no official field guide as of now in India. So basically, while we are going for any identification in the wild, there are these field guides which help you understand, the trees or various things that are there. But for mushrooms as such, there is no field guide that has been any official field guide for mushrooms in India. But there are few books that are there. One of the books that would be very helpful for someone who is a beginner, a book called as Mushroom Demystified. So even though it's not specific to India, but it's a very good book for anyone who wants to get into mushroom identification. So you can read the book called Mushroom Demystified. And for reading material, there are few research papers that are there, but there is no specific guidebook in place which you can refer to abhi tak, until now for India. Another question.
I think Dinkara has another question. Would you like
Yes.
to take that?
Yeah, so edible or non-edible, how do we identify? Again, there are few thumb rules to identify, distinguish edibility and about the edibility of mushroom. So basically, we have to go first of all species by species, right? We have to be 100% sure that a mushroom is edible before we can, say that it's an edible mushroom. But there are few basic thumb rules that can help us identify that the mushroom can be edible or not. Of course, like as I just mentioned, like it's a whole topic in itself, and like I would not be able to do the justice to the topic in like 5 or 10 minutes, because even if I share, like you might not be able to understand and you might get confused with the poisonous mushroom. So there are few basic thumb rules, but basically we have to go species by species to identify the edibility of a mushroom.
I think with mushrooms, like Shrey has been repeating himself, we should be extremely careful. So it cannot be done in this session. Maybe we have to hold another session for an hour to help you identify between poisonous and non-poisonous, because we consume them.
Yes, it's very, very important. Like the most important thing that you might take away from today's session is, that if you spot any mushrooms, of course, like this session will help you spotting the mushrooms and identify different ecosystem. But if you spot something, please do not consume anything, do not touch anything, and of course, do not pluck anything, and absolutely do not eat anything until and unless you are 100% sure about its edibility. Also, I'm sharing the link to the support group where you can, in the chat box, where you can share the mushroom photographs for the identification. There are a few other experts also in the group who can get the mushroom identified. So until and unless you are 100% sure about its edibility, do not consume any mushroom. Any other question anyone has?
While we wait for others to share any more questions, I have written down two if you'd like to answer. When you said you were giving instructions about taking the best way of taking a photograph, to be able to seek help from these groups, should at any point we pluck a mushroom to get the right angle? Let's say if it's a small mushroom, or is that discouraged?
So I would highly discourage to pluck a mushroom. So of course, like while we are even trying to collect mushrooms for specimens or for other purposes, one of the tools that we should carry is a knife. So that's the first thing. While we pluck a mushroom, we might damage the habitat or the ecosystem of mushroom. So never pluck a mushroom. That's one thing. You should try and cut it with a knife, because we do not want to damage the ecosystem. Also, one very important thing is that if we do not want to, if it's not necessary to pluck the mushroom, we can actually skip that altogether. And there are ways to click the photograph of the underside also without plucking the mushroom. So I'll share one very interesting way. You can carry a dental mirror along with you, the mirror that a dentist use. So you can place that dental mirror, and that will give you the glimpse of the underside of mushroom. So that's one way. Also, you can click photograph by turning the mushroom around without plucking it. Yeah.
That really helps, because I remember going on one walk and there was constant discussion and dilemma about, should we be plucking it to identify it? Should we or should we not? I don't think we have more questions. So I'd like to ask you my second question, although we are at 5:30. You had mentioned an experiment for everybody to go and try making a spore print of a button mushroom.
Yeah.
So at what point of the life of a mushroom, after it's harvested, or let's say after it's cut and plucked, will it release these spores? So do the mushrooms that we've bought, have they already released the spore, or do they continue to release?
So that's a very interesting question. So mushroom starts to release its spores when the mushroom is mature. So the mushrooms that are very mature, they will release the spores. That's the first thing. So it depends upon like how mature mushroom is. The smaller mushrooms, they will also release spores. So mushrooms basically release the spores continuously after they are being harvested. But the maximum spore print that we can get is from a mature mushroom, because that's the time when the life cycle is about to end. So mushroom is releasing lots and lots of spores.
Okay, thank you for that.
Also, I've shared the link to my Instagram handle in the chat box. So you can check out the Instagram handle also. And here also, like, I keep doing these very short live videos, 5 or 10 minutes lives on various topics on mushrooms. So for example, we recently did a live on mushroom myths. What are the myths that are there related to mushrooms? And I also keep sharing about interesting mushrooms that I come across on Instagram.
Kush, do we have any more questions or shall we close?
We don't have any more questions. Is there anything you want to add, Padma?
I just want to thank Kush, the participants, and Shrey for being a part of this today. I have always been excited about fungi, and I was looking for someone who's very passionate about this to share the knowledge. It's a primer, I would say, today on fungi. It's not a very deep down dive into the subject. I think we need to have a series of sessions like this to cover different aspects of fungi, whether identification or, there are other topics that he covers. Shay has several topics that he covers around mushrooms. And this is just to inspire and also connect to him so that those who want to go on ahead on this journey could find him on Instagram and then continue this. So and thanks a lot for taking your time today, Shrey. And I've seen on your Instagram that you do a lot of interesting stuff around fungi, and hope more of you connect with him. And maybe in future we can have a couple of other sessions on deep diving into this. So thanks a lot, all of you, Kush, for the introduction, and Shrey, and all the participants for joining us today. Thank you. We will be recording this and putting it on YouTube and sharing the link on my Facebook page. So yeah, that'll be something you can come back and refer in future. Thank you.
As we are leaving, because you've just mentioned about the Facebook page, I've dropped a link to the Facebook page in the chat as well. So there's two things you can quickly check: Shrey's Instagram account and the Compassionate Living Facebook page to keep in touch about fungi, other talks to come, and a recording of this one. Thank you so much, Shrey.
All right. Thank you for having me, Kush. Thank you for having me, Padmavati. This was a very interesting session. And as you shared, Padmavati, it's just the tip of iceberg that we touched. So fungi is a whole new world in itself. Like, even if we are talking about its ecology, like, it's a whole new world. So we can explore different topics around fungi. And if you guys are interested, we can do series of sessions on different topics that are there around fungi, which will not only help us sharpen our mushroom identification skills in the wild, but also help us become better conservationists and ecologists. Thank you for joining, everyone, and it was great to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Shrey. I'll end this call now.